is pretty minimal in this instance. And also, we have seen that shaming doesn't work. And you heard President Obama say there, public shaming does not work with President Vladimir Putin. We have seen the U.S. and the West try to do this many times over. I'm thinking specifically of Aleppo and of Syria and all the carnage there, much of it at the hands of Russian firepower. And we have never seen the Russians moved in that instance. And I think Obama, it was less a message being delivered to President Putin today than it was a message being delivered to the American people, that essentially it's very difficult publicly to deal with a situation like the one the U.S. has on its hand with this hacking. And of course, it's very difficult to make any announcement publicly about what kind of a reaction there might be, because this is hybrid warfare. It's not a straightforward eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It has to be clandestine. And so in a sense, I felt there was almost a concession that the president's hands were a little bit tied when it comes to publicly giving an explanation of how he's dealing with this. Well,
interesting. Phil Mudd, the president was blunt in describing how he threatened, he warned Putin when he saw him at the G20 summit. Listen to this.
In early September, when I saw President Putin in China, I felt that the most effective way to ensure that that didn't happen was to talk to him directly and tell him to cut it out. There were going to be some serious consequences if he didn't. And in fact, we did not see further tampering of the election process.
When he says election process, he means voting machines, stuff like that. But there has been other hacking by the Russians, we're told, that's still going on. How much of an impact would a threat like that to Putin really be?
How close to zero can you get, Wolf? Let's take this out in the public domain. We've seen Russian intervention into Crimea and eastern Ukraine, public, with the Europeans involved. Impact not only zero, but if you look at the Russian popular opinion on these interventions, extremely positive. Let's go to Syria. A lot of pressure on the Russians about not only intervention, but humanitarian violations, bombing of cities by the Russians. Impact not only zero, but the Russian population is entirely backing Putin on this. So you take and contrast that to what we saw here, a private conversation with Putin saying, please don't do this. I think the impact is zero. He's saying, show me the money. If you can't bring some power against me to oppose this, I don't buy it.
But they would not be so interested in having the sanctions removed if they were completely ineffectual.
No, I agree with that, but if you look at how we try to oppose him publicly and the lack of impact, to say that a conversation privately would have an impact, unless it's backed by some clause, I don't see it.
And the clause being more sanctions, or the U.S. launching a counter cyber attack and releasing information that could be awkward or embarrassing to Putin and the Russians.
Which the president has said several times that they will do, at a time of their own choosing, some of which we may ultimately...
Why are you shaking your head?
You can't do that. First of all,
you can't do what?
You can't go against the Russians with the same thing they did with us, for two reasons. First of all, if you fight with pigs, you're going to get dirty. And the way you're going to get dirty with this in the second instance is if you start to try to attack them privately or in public with revelations, for example, about corruption. You want to tell me what Putin says with 80% support rate? Look, this is the Americans against us, trying to oppose us, trying to become the Russian power once. I think he turns it to his advantage.
But there may be other forms of cyber damage you can do.
Could be.
They're not based on shaming. Not based on shaming.
Yeah. Hold on one second. All right, Evan, go ahead, then I'll bring in Sunland.
Well, I was just simply going to add that, the view of the intelligence community is that the U.S., frankly, has a lot more to lose. I mean, we have a lot more parts of our infrastructure, a lot of our economy that is dependent upon the Internet. And so there's some danger to that. And it's also the case, and we should probably make this clear, that the Russians believe that they didn't start this. We started this. They believe that the U.S. has been supporting organizations inside Russia that are anti-Putin, that try to meddle with their elections. And they also view that, for instance, the Panama Papers that expose some of Russia's richest people and where they were hiding their money, including people connected to Putin, they think that the U.S. was behind that. So they think they're acting in response to things that we were doing.
Interesting. That's fascinating material. Sunland, the President of the United States, very blunt, I thought, very blunt today. How does he see the cyber attack wrapping up his 8-year legacy as president? You've covered him from the beginning.
Yeah, well, certainly I think like every outgoing president, they are very aware of how their reputation is shaping up. And I do think we saw that reflected, this kind of concern that that he would be wrapped up in this today, and how he tried in small ways to attend to that. We saw him at multiple times kind of weave in, once he was talking about defending the handling of the attack, and he said, I wanted to make sure we were playing this thing straight. So coming out and saying, like, what I did, my part in this, I thought I did well and would not have go back and do it again, so no regrets there. I think if you're President Obama, certainly going into today, you would love to be able, nothing else to talk about the last 8 years of progress that he thinks he's made. He knows he doesn't have that luxury. It's not the day to do that.
An interesting aspect of today, and you think about kind of the tension, the extraordinary tension we saw yesterday between the White House press secretary and the president-elect. The president has clearly chosen to play the good cop in this transition, and the way he talked about Donald Trump today. I mean, he was not going into a mode of criticizing him, but I think this may be a case of watch what I do, not what I say, because there is also a sense in which he was signaling today he may create facts on the ground that constrain or try to shape Donald Trump's choices, both in the nature of this report and the information that comes out, and possibly in actions that he takes against Russia that would then force Donald Trump, if he wants to undo them, to very publicly make that one of the first actions of his presidency.
I know the president had a huge audience out there, not just the reporters in the room, national audience, international audience, but I think he was also talking specifically to the president-elect of the United States, and we know that Donald Trump was watching the news conference as well. We're getting new information, more information, and we'll continue all of our special coverage right here in the Situation Room after a quick break.